Well, hello there, and welcome to our podcast. I'm Bill.
And I'm Curtis,
Together we are father and son, and we are...
your Geekdumb prophets.
Hey, Curtis, how you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. It's been
Long time no see.
Yeah, I know. I've had a birthday since the last time that we met.
You're so old, Brewster.
I know. So old and so full of wisdom now.
So full of wisdom. Lots of wisdom. Maybe useless wisdom, but it's still wisdom.
It's all useless.
It's all useless.
It's all useless. Somehow
it's
I
all,
get by at my work, so...
It's all a matter of how you use it. It's like this pointless, useless information that we think we have, and let's make a podcast.
Yes, exactly.
That's right. No one else knows what's going on, but we do. So let's make a podcast. Isn't that how most podcasts start?
Yes.
That's all right. All right. So hey, well, listeners, then watchers. Thanks for joining our episode 6. This is our 6th podcast, Curtis. So exciting.
Episode 6.
Episode 6.
At least we're trying to get some level of consistency, but it gets
it was a little tough there.
A little difficult.
We a little tough there because somebody was turning 29.
Shh.
And saving China.
Stop it. Yeah, you did. You came down. You came up down here to Colorado and visited me.
Oh, dude,
it
was so nice to get some fresh, brisk mountain air.
You could barely breathe.
Hey, I did all right. Not barely. It was worse. The last couple of times I've come there, I was sick.
It's
both
sick,
times.
or you had injured yourself.
Yeah, there you go. We injured yourself. There you go. Mm-hmm. I injured, but that's nice and simply put.
You're showing your age.
I'm showing my age. So are you.
I am young and spry. What are you talking about?
That's right. You're that millennial generation, I guess, right?
Oh, don't remind me.
Well, yeah, I had a great time getting to see you over on your birthday. Did you have a good time?
I guess, yes.
Okay, now I heard you treated yourself. Wait a minute.
Did.
I just jumped over that. You guess? You mean when I was there? Oh, whatever.
It's not like I spent money on a poster because you decided to go to a place that I actively avoid because of the fact that I spend large amounts of money on.
Yeah, but we had a blast. Curtis and I did what Curtis and I do when we get together. We just did nerd stuff. We went to comic book shops. We went to secondhand stores. Went through all of his old comic books. Found a bunch of stuff that he had doubles and stuff he doesn't need. So we're organizing it and getting ready to try to sell it. And that was hours. That was 6 hours one night of going through those. That's a blast for us. Other people just probably going, "What?" They all look the same to me.
It was fun. I had a good time.
I had a blast. I'm glad I got to finally. It's been a little while since I've gotten a chance to get out there since your nieces, their second one was born.
This is true, but
that's right.
Well,
so that's the key to get married.
They were just born. I mean, that kind of leads into what we're talking about today in regards to
first appearances,
making a first appearance or a first impression. Appearance.
Oh, that's right, Penelope. Shout out for my granddaughter. She's 3. She turned 3 yesterday. Wait a minute. Only one of those. She turned 3. Penelope, this one's for you.
Good time.
Remember, Grandpa's your best friend. That's right. Good times. All right, but while I was there, you were talking about a game, and I think you said you went out and got it for your birthday, treating yourself.
I did because Hogwarts Legacy came out my birthday weekend.
Oh, Harry Plopper.
Harry Plopper, as the Simpsons call him. But no, the game came out. I have thus beaten the game, which took me about a little over a week. But yes, I have finally beaten Hogwarts Legacy. At least
must be nice to have the time to do that.
That's time that I had to set aside, and meaning I didn't do anything else. So
good thing I got to see you before you got the game then.
Yes, exactly, because I haven't left this room in what feels like a week and a half. because
Did you air it out at least?
it's been aired out. I have windows in here, thank you. Now,
I have
normally this place
window.
just smells like steak, so so that's all that I eat.
Oh, oh. Well, I mean, not that bad of a ooh. All right, so I'm assuming since you beat it so quickly,
The
two
game,
thumbs up.
I give it 2 thumbs up. I don't think I'm gonna do any of the end game, post game content with it. It was a very long game. It took me about 47 hours to beat in total,
That's
and
a good money's worth for the game, though.
that's just the main campaign, and it ends up being about 70% of the overall like challenges and stuff that you can actually do in the game. But
Hmm.
by what the game actually was is that it's one big gigantic adventure game. So a lot of what you're doing is it's side quests throughout the entire world of, or at least Hogwarts. So
Hogwarts World. That's right.
you have Hogwarts, and it's all of the Scottish Highlands where Hogwarts resides.
There can be only
So
one.
you can go into the Forbidden Forest, go down
That's
into a
real bad.
lot of the caves. Just enough with the quotes. Go down into the caves and just explore the whole area. Hogwarts itself is fully realized, so it takes forever to explore the castle. It was a fun game. Takes place in the 1800 like late 1890s, I believe. So it's so far removed from Harry Potter that, in all honesty, you don't need to know anything about Harry
Don't
Potter
even
to
need to
enjoy
know.
this game.
Well, I was gonna say, and that's a good money's worth because most games are like 20 to 22 hours of playtime. So
If
if it
they're
took you 47,
if they're 20 to 22, I do not spend $60 on them.
that's
I
oh really? Okay.
I have to get a minimum of 40 to 60 hours of playtime out of a game before I
To
decide
make
to
it worth
buy
it,
it. Yeah.
to make it worth your while, it must make me. All right. Well, today you mentioned about Penelope first appearances. Glad you enjoyed the game. I I actually started a book while I was there over at your place, and then I read it on the plane.
It was a piece of crap, wasn't it?
It was a big pile of poo. This book is awful. I think it's one of the worst written books in this new Star Wars weird universe that they got going.
From the little bits of dialogue and text that you sent me, I would have to say it's probably one of the worst things,
It's
period,
the
to
worst.
come
For a good
out
time,
of.
just read. For a good time, just read the inserts on the cover.
You'll find
That'll
out
you know
exactly why it's
exactly. Read it
probably
on your own
terrible.
time,
Yes.
and let me know what you think of it.
That
So
that little nugget of information is not going to go onto the internet at the
exactly.
moment.
Well, speaking of first appearances and first impressions, that's what we're going to be talking about today. We wanted to talk about first appearances. Now, this is going to be a little different than first origin stories. There's the origin stories themselves. That's a big thing in the comic book realm. So, for instance, Curtis, Batman.
Parents were killed in an alley.
Everybody knows. Superman,
From planet Krypton. Crashed in
Spider-Man,
Kansas. Bitten by a
Kansas.
spider.
What kind of spider?
A radioactive spider.
Okay, Daredevil.
Had ooze splashed in his eyes.
All right, so those are popular stories that everybody knows. Like origin stories. That's kind of what makes a character, comic book character, famous. It makes them their starting point. Like what makes them want to become the person that they become, the hero that.
It brings them into the realm of modern myth.
Right. What was the difference that you would always tell me between Marvel and DC Universe was like gods among men versus men among the gods.
Yeah, like where Marvel's supposed to be this idea of the world outside of your window, DC was supposed to be far more grandiose in its presentation and appearance, where things may not necessarily be popular, but it's things that we want to happen.
Right.
Well,
Yep.
may not necessarily be capable of happening, but we would very much want them to.
we we wish
We
they were.
wish.
All right. So I've developed something just for Curtis. So our listeners here, we're gonna put Curtis to the test.
I
He
have a
even yeah,
feeling.
I
I have a
mentioned this
feeling that
before.
this is gonna ruin some of my nerd cred, but let's go.
Some of your nerd cred, some of your
Oh,
street
well,
cred.
it kind of I know what this is. We did talk about it prior to the
Little
start of the
little
show,
briefly.
but I don't know any of the characters. If you want to go ahead and lead the audience into what you are
Okay.
intending to do.
Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is first appearances. So the importance of first appearances. Many times, if you have ever read a comic book or seen a comic, all of a sudden they'll introduce a villain or a sidekick or somebody that you're like, who is this? Where did that come from? And all of a sudden, either they're like psh, written out in the next story, or boom, they become like this huge, brilliant idea that everybody's like, hey, Batman got a Robin? Well, that's awesome. Let's keep Robin in there. Everybody liked the idea of the sidekick. They were into the sidekicks, with and Captain America having Bucky and all those different things. So we're gonna just kind of give you a brief synopsis again. This whole idea of the Geekdumb Prophets. You feeling geekdumb? We're just gonna kind of give you a quick overview by doing this quiz. See if you can follow through. See how many of these you might know as well. Kind of quiz yourself. This will be fun. All right, we're gonna make some of these easy right off the bat. So the origin story, first appearance, not origin story, but first appearance. Superman.
Action Comics #1,
Easy. You know when that was?
1939.
Close. June 38.
June of
1939 was the Batman.
Action
And what
Comics number
was
27.
who?
Detective Comics #27.
Nerd cred going. Action Comics. There's so many of them.
I
So
was
this.
thinking. I was thinking Action Comics because I was still caught up on Superman was
There you
1939.
go.
Why you said 38, I don't know.
Well, point. This is point that we're trying to bring across. Like first appearance. Actually, Superman shows up in Action Comics. Batman's in Detective Comics, issue 27. So it wasn't about Batman, but Batman was mentioned, brought about as a character. Boom, he gets this whole new, well, basically the Batman universe. How about that? Oh,
The Bat
okay, here's the tough
Family.
one. How about this Wonder Woman?
Oh,
And she actually wasn't on the cover.
no, it was
Do, 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 do.
it wasn't Adventure Comics.
No, it's the other one.
It
The
was it
All
All Star.
Star.
It was All Star
Yep.
Comics. I forget which
All
issue it was, but yeah,
number 8.
Adventure Comics was the first appearance of Superboy.
Supergirl. Superboy and Supergirl, wasn't it?
No, that was still an Action Comics one.
That was an Action Comics when it was. All right. Iron Man, easy one.
Oh, that Tales of
So,
Suspense 27.
you were right. Tales of Suspense, number 39.
39.
27 was
Okay.
Batman. That's right. That's all right. Who was Okay? How about Wolverine?
Are we
Ooh.
going with his preview or his first full appearance?
All right. This is the fight of the nerds for those watching this. It's like, what is a true first appearance? When they're like introduced in the last panel and you see like a hand or you see them say something, or is it the first boom, here's the character, here's their name and everything?
Well, if we want to start getting into that argument, Wolverine first appears at the very final panel of issue 180 of Incredible Hulk, and then appears in issue 181 of Incredible Hulk where he fights him.
Where he fights them. So that's an important distinction between nerds, I'll tell you.
His first
There's
appearance is
many
completely different from Giant Size X-Men #1 whenever he joined the X-Men.
giant size X-Men #1. Speaking of that, whose first appearance was in there?
Colossus, Nightcrawler, Storm, Thunderbird.
Oh, you got them all. Okay. All right. These ones going to be easy for you. Psylocke. Your
Are
favorite character?
my favorite character. Are we talking with her first full appearance or her first United States appearance?
Again, let's keep this nerd related. Let's keep this,
Okay.
fully cultured.
Her first full appearance is technically in Captain Britain issue #8 in December of 1976. She is almost as old as the original Giant, well, as the Giant Size X-Men team, debuting about 2 years later. She didn't
Oh,
fully appear in the United States until 1986 with New Mutants Annual number 2.
so she didn't show up in the U.S. till almost 10 years.
Almost 10 years later, she was created by Chris Claremont. She was
Hmm.
then penned into the X-Men via Chris Claremont as he wanted to inject some more elements of British culture into the book itself. He found that character was rather popular and was already established as a mutant, so he decided, well, let's go ahead and bring her over from my UK days, my Marvel UK days, and bring her fully into the X-Men.
Oh, that makes see, and that brings out a point that we've always talked about, the importance of pop culture or subcultures within before they even become pop culture, shall we say. That, the changes happen here in the little cultures that ultimately affects the larger culture. So here he is bringing in somebody who's a British comic star, trying to bring her into the American culture to kind of add to our subculture. And that's the part I always like, that you truly affect a culture in society by its subcultures. You don't just all of a sudden come in and say, "Hey, we demand that everybody read comics." But the comics started with a bunch of little nerds reading it for 10
Yeah.
cents on the street corner, and all of a sudden it's this
You gotta give people a reason to read them.
that's right. Yeah, it's this huge subculture. All
Yep.
right. Here's an easy one. Deadpool.
New Mutants number 98.
98. That was in February of 91.
It
That's
was.
crazy to think, he's a fairly um recently new anti-hero superhero, and how huge he is.
Ugh,
I'm
he's
sure
still
Ryan
so
Reynolds,
annoying.
he didn't help at all, I'm sure. All right, here's okay, I'm gonna switch it up here. Amazing Fantasy number 15.
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man,
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. Okay, uh, All American Comics number 16.
All American Comics number 16? Oh, man. Is that Shazam?
Is it Green?
Is it Green Arrow?
Green Lantern.
Green
I didn't
Lantern.
I didn't know that one
Oh,
either.
man.
He's been around since 1940.
Oh, the original Alan Scott Green Lantern.
Yeah, the original Alan
Oh,
Scott.
yeah,
There you go.
the
Nerd
one that
creds come
nobody
back.
pays attention to anymore since they decided to retcon a ton of his stuff with New
Oh,
52.
round of applause for
Yeah,
Curtis.
thank
He
you.
redeemed
Thank you.
himself. Redeemed
I
himself.
did.
Okay,
I tried.
here we go. See if you get the trick on these ones. The Flash.
Are we going with Jay Garrick or are we going with Wally West? Not Wally West. Barry Allen.
No, not Barry Allen. I'm going with Jay Garrick.
Jay Garrick. I don't remember his original first appearance. I'm not a fan of Golden Age comics.
I
I will
know.
just put that out here right now.
This is where I was like, it was a trick because it's actually Flash Comics number 1. See, some of them show up in others. Some of them just straight up get their own comic line, and they're famous. Captain America, same thing.
Captain America Comics issue number 1
There it is. Captain America Comics issue number 1.
from
Okay.
1941. One of the books to help instigate us getting into the war.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, they used
Yeah,
it.
they used it.
Subculture affected the pop culture.
Yeah.
All right, Thor.
It was Journey into Mystery. It was like in the early
Yep.
30s.
Yeah, it
Because
was way back.
he ran almost to like issue 124. It was still titled Journey into Mystery, and then it became Thor.
And then at that point, Thor. Yeah, so it started with issue 83 is what I.
83.
And
Okay.
then you ready for this one? Sonic the Hedgehog. What is that? You
I
weren't
have
prepared
it.
for that one.
I have
Sonic the
it.
Hedgehog, the first issue.
Issue number 0 for Archie Comics. If you really want to get into his first comic book appearance. It was actually a one-shot preview that they put out with the first release of the first game back in 1991. Which
Hmm.
then later found its way into promotional material for, I believe it was 3 books. One of them was Justice League Europe, which I actually do have that issue. I just didn't really feel like digging it out right now.
You have the just, but you don't have the. That's the only thing you're missing with Sonic, isn't it? The original promotional post, the promotional
I
comic
don't
book.
have the original promotional comic book, which had nothing to do with Archie's material, but I don't have that one, and then I don't own any of the British Fleetway Sonic the Hedgehog comics,
Okay,
which
so if
good
any of
luck
the
finding
listeners
those.
want to get Curtis a gift, there you go.
Oh man.
That's right. All right, we're gonna switch it up here too. this is this is always interesting to me because I kind of consider some of these guys like sometimes you picture villains and things like that being one-hit wonders. Like they're
Oh.
testing the waters. The writers are testing the waters, saying, "Hey, this
Well,
is I think this would be a great idea."
it's very much like the weekly monster format of Japan, where you have like kind of like Godzilla and Ultraman and Power Rangers, where every week they fight a new monster. It's a new
Right.
villain. But with comic books, it was very much still that pulp heroism, where every week the hero had to face a new challenge. So you had to come up with a new idea of what that challenge was supposed to be. So you more or less get one-off villains every once in a while. They do stick around, hence characters like Magneto, who was in the very first issue of X-Men in
X-Men.
1963, but then really didn't have much of an impact, but yet still managed to stick around into Roy Thomas's run starting in about like the issue 30 range. I forget which one specifically, where he became more of a force, and then whenever Claremont took over, he started to actually take the ideas of that character and actually give them some level of characterization, where you started to see kind of a blur in his intentions between hero and villain.
See, I always like that. Like I said, the difference where these guys show up and some of them stick around, some of them don't. And I like because Stan Lee, I know, was doing a lot of that culture with Japanese culture and trying to make comic books popular over there as well as it is here. Even, I recently watched a documentary thing, I think it was on Netflix, about the Spider-Man TV shows in
Oh,
Japan.
oh, and the fact that that particular Spider-Man TV show, if that didn't exist, Power Rangers would not exist.
Wouldn't exist because of that. I
Oh,
mean,
the entire tokusatsu realm of entertainment exists entirely because of the Japanese Spider-Man.
and it's so different
Yep,
than
it's very
American
different.
Spider-Man. It's very different, but Stan Lee,
It's
boom,
fun.
boom, boom, step
It's
of it's fun.
it's fun. It's not Peter Parker, but it is a Spider-Man. It's one of the first alternative ideas of who Spider-Man could be. And it's a fun if you like your Power Rangers or your giant robot sound
Robots
stages. Give it a
fighting
good
monsters.
give it a watch. It came out in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s.
Well,
It's a fun, interesting show.
we'll do an episode on those. What do you call that when you're the mecha monsters when they're fighting?
Tokusatsu.
Is that the style
That
like
that's that
Godzilla fighting
that
the?
is what it is.
And what's that? What's oh my goodness, my brain is slipping. The ones that you liked with the
Pacific Rim.
Pacific Rim. Those were surprisingly, I enjoyed them.
I
They were
like the
like,
first one at least.
yeah, the first one. I mean, they weren't like high quality, but it was interesting. Okay, all right. So villains. So here we go. Let's see. You've told me in advance that you may not be as good with the villains,
Oh,
but that's
uh,
okay. Maybe this will be an easy one. I don't know. The Joker,
the Joker, Batman #1.
Batman number one, Joker and Catwoman
Joker,
introduced in that same one.
Joker, Catwoman, and Alfred.
Oh, all of them in
Yep.
there. So Alfred's not a bad guy, by the way.
Just saying, Alfred made his first appearance in Batman #1.
There it is. Okay. This one, Doctor Doom.
Oh, is it Fantastic Four? It's not the first issue. I think it was like issue 12.
5. Yep.
It was issue
because that's
5.
where
Okay.
they go through the whole thing, and then they find out that there's the
Yep.
fifth part of the Chinese
Other.
five element.
Yeah. The expedition that they went through. Yep.
Yeah, the air, wind, earth,
Metal.
metal. He's the metal. That's right. All right. Action Comics number 23 introduced Supermans.
Is it Lex Luthor? Or is it
Lex Luthor.
Mistleplex?
Nope, that was Lex Luthor was number
Okay.
23.
Lex Luthor.
Venom.
Ooh, again, we're going to have the same discussion that we're going to have with Wolverine. So it's either the final page of issue 299 of Amazing Spider-Man
Okay, you got it.
or issue 300 of Amazing Spider-Man. Or we can really get into the argument that they later retcon that a shadow that's in Web of Spider-Man issue number 8 was technically his first appearance, but, that's a retcon and more people say, yeah, that was Venom all the way back then. And it's like,
So even the whole idea
sure.
of first appearance is definitive based on your perspective. Is it a claw? Is it what's the Mary Jane, the hair toss?
Oh,
And
Mary Jane wasn't even a hair toss. You could just see the
sure.
lower part of her body, and you didn't see like any of her hair because she was
Hey
obscured
Tiger,
by a
you hit the jackpot.
a lamp in issue Amazing Spider-Man 25.
Yeah. And then she doesn't actually come into view to like issue 43 or something like that.
Issue 42, final
42.
page, where she goes, "Face it, Tiger, you just hit the
You just
jackpot."
hit the jackpot. That's right.
Iconic
Mary Jane.
image.
Yeah, that's one thing Curtis and I do agree on. We're both kind of Mary Jane fans. Sorry for all those that love Gwen Stacy, Liz Allen. We're Mary Jane fans
They're
all the
all
way.
boring. They're
They're
all
all
boring compared to
compared.
Mary
Mary
Jane.
Jane just rocks, man. All right. Oh, this one will be interesting. Kingpin.
Kingpin.
This might be a little
Oh.
tougher because he's one of those that flopped back and forth between being a Daredevil villain and a
Well,
Spider-Man
he
villain.
was mostly a Spider-Man villain up through
Yeah.
the late 70s whenever Miller decided to utilize him as a primary Daredevil villain. So, oh man, I actually have no idea. Like, was it even a Stan Lee or was it a Roger Stern character?
Issue number 50 of Amazing Spider-Man.
Issue
So that would have
50.
been
Okay.
Stan Lee still, right?
That would have been Stan Lee.
Yep. This one you probably know, Kang.
Kang, the Conqueror.
Kang the Conqueror.
Are we talking with Rama Tut? Are we talking Kang? Or are we talking Immortus? Because they're all
Kang.
technically the same character. Kang would be Avengers issue number 8.
Oh, ta-da! Street cred restored.
Rama Tut is issue 12 of Fantastic Four.
We gotta have like some bells. Ding, ding, ding,
now.
ding, ding.
Yeah, I
Curtis
remember
got it.
his actual first appearance, Nathaniel Richards' first appearance, period, like it within the timeline of Marvel, is Fantastic Four number 12. I think that was it, was the first appearance of Rama Tut. And then shortly after, he appeared in issue number 8 of Avengers.
Yeah, so all kinds of variations. Okay, now I know Amazing Spider-Man. If anybody's ever read it, they introduced like almost all of his major villains that he has to this day are all like in the first 20 issues. But do you know which issue was the Green Goblin?
The Green Goblin. Ooh. It's not issue 1 because that was the Chameleon.
That was Chameleon.
Issue 31 was Rhino. Doc Ock was like within the first 10.
Yeah, he was pretty quick.
He was pretty quick. I don't remember specifically how early he was introduced.
Number 14. Yeah, Doc Ock was number 3.
14. Okay, I was thinking around like either 8 or 13. So 14. Okay, 14 makes sense then.
Yeah, and then one of the other early ones was the Vulture too. He was up there number 6, I think.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep.
Let me find that. I think Oh no, he was actually number 2. He was the second villain. So Doc Ock was his third.
Yep.
Chameleon, Vulture, Doc Ock, right off the bat. Boom,
I
boom,
think
boom. He's
Craven
on
was
it.
like issue 6.
How about Harley Quinn?
Harley Quinn? She had a one-shot Harley Quinn. Her first actual appearance was actually in the Joker Laughs. No, it was a Christmas special episode for Batman the Animated Series, and then she had a one-shot in 1999 during the No Man's Land adventure for Batman.
The Bat. The Bat.
Yep.
All right. And then Thanos. The mighty
Thanos.
Thanos.
Iron
That's a
Man
little
50.
tougher.
Iron Man 55.
Oh, you boom! Nailed it. I thought that was interesting because that was like Drax warned him through like a vision or something like that about the.
That was the first appearance of Drax and Thanos, and then that
I was,
story arc goes into Captain Marvel. It doesn't even conclude within Iron Man. That was a one shot that Jim Starlin was writing.
yeah, amazes me how huge Thanos is not just in the MCU, the cinematic Marvel universe, but he's huge in the comics. He's everywhere,
If
and just out of that.
Thanos is one of those villains within Marvel that now they use him quite frequently because it's name recognition, but going back to like the 70s whenever he was actually fully introduced as a villain, he was more utilized as if Thanos shows up, the entire Marvel universe is paying attention to him. Like the entire, you read the original Thanos Wars that covered throughout Captain Marvel, throughout Adam Warlock. It was one of those first story arcs that actually had ramifications across other books like Avengers and even Daredevil, who was at the time basically a no-name character that
He was
was
just
being
a street character,
published.
which were no names, street
Yep.
characters. Well, and then Thanos, like I said, has just become this huge thing out of a one shot, like you said. Like, hey, we'll give a Cosmos character in an Iron Man comic.
Yep.
Okay, why not? All right, and then Black Panther's archenemy in Killmonger.
Oh, that one I definitely don't know.
This one was I actually had to look this one up because I was like, where was it? It was in Jungle Action #6
Oh
in
man.
1973, and this was actually Black Panther's first solo story. Was in Jungle Action #6. He first appeared in Black Panther first appeared in Fantastic Four #52. Again, one I didn't know. I didn't know he actually showed up in Black Panther or in the FF
He showed
to
up
begin with.
originally in Fantastic Four. He was in a couple issues of that, and then he had Jungle Action, and then he became more of a side character leading up to the issue 100 of Tales of Suspense whenever it turned into Captain America.
Turned back into Captain America itself.
Yep.
Okay. Well, yeah, because even the first appearance of Black Panther was 66, and he didn't get his first solo issue till 73. So 7 years later, again, it was just this whole idea with first appearances, the difference that it can make, because it seems like, I don't know if they do like a poll when they introduce a character, like, hey, do you like this, or do they go based off of sales?
At that point,
That
it would have had to have been sales and then just the letters that people would have been writing into Marvel via Foom or something.
Yeah, back in the
Now,
old days where people wrote in and you could read your letter
yeah,
at the
that's
back of a comic and stuff like that.
and that is now in regards to a poll. Japan actually does polls for all of their primary shonen. They actually do polls based off of favorite characters, favorite manga that's currently running in the magazines for Shonen Jump and other shonen
Huh.
titles, and that is actually how they determine the popularity and main staying power of a particular manga. Once your manga actually drops out of those particular polls, they no longer will fund it. They'll actually cut your story short. They're like, you fell out, you're done. You can't keep the momentum going anymore. It is
Kill the character off or
ruthless.
something.
Kill it, end the story short. They'll just end it abruptly. It happens. Like I have manga that's back there that you know got canceled from Shonen Jump but there was enough of a popularity at least to get it moved into another magazine, so it actually finished somewhere else versus the original shonen mangas that were being published. So that
Probably like, people TV shows that get jumped and bought
well,
out by a different network or something.
and that also happens within American comics. Now, we just mentioned Thanos. That was a big one where he was in that one-off story. But then that particular story arc actually proceeded through 4 different titles. So you had Captain Marvel, and then into Adam Warlock, and then a bunch of then Marvel team up, and then ultimately concluding in a graphic novel with the death of Captain Marvel. So you had this one story arc that actually went through 3 or 4, well, at least 2 different canceled titles at the time, because Adam Warlock, after that story concluded, ceased to be published. So
Right.
you had a popular story that was being told throughout other issues, but had a first appearance within more of a popular title like Iron Man, who even then was still a C-list character.
Well, and like even like you said, with the difference with Captain Marvel, most people nowadays would hear Captain Marvel, they think Brie Larson. What's her name? Brie Larson, whatever.
The,
The modern day one.
a plank of wood. That's what I call her.
Oh, jeez,
I'm
harsh.
full. I am harsh to that entire movie. I hated every aspect of it. I've seen
Well,
it once. I will never watch it again.
when you think of first appearances, you think of that like, okay, even the alias is the same, or the persona or something, but the character can be different. So, for
Yep.
instance, like not just Captain Marvel, but Green Goblin. The first Green Goblin was
Norman Osborn.
Norman, right? And then once he is killed, which was also again a rarity that would happen in the comic universe, that a character or a villain was killed. And even then, I'm sure this was probably part of the whole CCA, the Comic Code of Association. Spider-Man couldn't kill him. The good guy couldn't kill him. He had to kill himself by accident, the Green Goblin. But then the Green Goblin was replaced by his son,
Harry.
Harry Osborn, which, at the time was Spider-Man's best, or Peter Parker's best friend. So it's just this. I always thought it was interesting, the difference that even the first appearances can change because it's a new goblin. Uh, well, even if we go down to the Hobgoblin, you
Oh
know,
man,
that first
that's a story arc.
first appearance of Hobgoblin, of the actual Hobgoblin, is, do you know that one?
That was Spectacular Spider-Man number 43. No, no, no. The
Okay,
actual first appearance of him
yeah.
was two. Oh man, 230, 238.
Wow. You are a nerd. Yes. Amazing Spider-Man number 238 in 83 was actually the first appearance of the Hobgoblin. So the villain known as the Hobgoblin. But, so what do we call his first appearance? Well, actually you find out later that the Hobgoblin is actually Roderick Kingsley, who is or was introduced in what Curtis said before, Spectacular Spider-Man number 43. So in 1980, so 3 years earlier. So it's interesting again to me, the difference of the first appearances, or we could even bring it to modern day, looking at our own lives of first first impressions. What's our first impressions of things? The first impression of Roger Kingsley was just kind of like, oh, he's just an extra, and wasn't he
he's
hitting on
he was a stuck up
reporter,
he was a stuck up fashion designer.
fashion designer? That
Yeah,
was
he was
it.
a stuck up fashion designer that had his place robbed
Yeah.
by a different villain that Spider-Man was tracking down at the time. So it eventually led up to the reveal of the Hobgoblin as a villain, but it more or less was, well, this dude's a little snobbish. I don't like him. And he was in that one issue, and that was it.
Yeah, and it was like his personal vendetta against Spider-Man. That's why he became the Hobgoblin. It
Yeah.
was just like, okay. you're coming up with these characters at this point, and there's lots of villains out there, lots of different things that are out there. But the whole idea that first impressions obviously can be very important. I was thinking of, I don't know if I told you this, the first Batman movie. My brother Matt, thanks Matt, he dared me. We went to go see Batman. It was the 4th of July weekend, so it was July 3rd. We went to go see it at Kingston Theater up in Sheboygan, and he says, "I dare you go talk to that girl. Go talk to that girl." And I was like, "What?" I think I was like 12, something like that. Whenever Batman came out, and I was like, "Okay." I was all nervous. I was all nervous, and
That would
I
have been
in
that would have
this,
been 89, so you probably would have been
yeah,
about
I was 12.
14.
89. No, wait a minute. How much?
You would have been about
89?
14.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Guess check the math. 17 or 18. Oh my goodness. That's right, because we came back up that summer to work the campground. So yes, I was at 17 or 18. I think I just turned 18. So went and saw that, and I went and sat down next to this girl. Screen goes black, and lights go down. They're about ready to roll trailers, and as soon as the screen goes down, I go sit next to her, and I said, "So, come here to see the movie?" Best pickup line ever, right? That's right.
That's a
So, how do you
terrible
think that first
impression.
impression went over?
That's like going to talk to a girl in the gym. Awkward.
What are you doing? I'm doing good. How are you doing? Yeah. Impressions can be good or bad. You think of uh, like Daredevil. No, no. Psychopaths kill for no reason. I kill for money. It's a job. No, wait, that didn't come out right. What movie?
That's Gross Point Blank.
Gross Point Blank. That's right.
Yeah, that one
Psychopaths
is.
kill for no reason. I kill for money. It's a job. Love it. All right. So when you
Terrible.
look at first impressions, a lot of different things can come into play, or first appearances, or what I say, first impressions. Um, you could think of different things in our lives. I've had a story. I met a friend of mine, Doran Connell, who actually has been helping us make those little art things at the beginning for our
They help
what
make
do you
all
call
the
those
little. They make all
the
the. He makes
thumbnails?
all the thumbnails.
Yeah, thanks, Doran. You're awesome, man. We love you. Good times. I met Doran like at 6 o'clock in the morning at a Walmart
Standing
because
in
I was
line
doing
for Star Wars figures.
looking for Star Wars toys. I am not kidding.
Yeah.
I am still friends with this guy for years. I will bring up more stories on this about things that we have done. Highlander, there can be only one. The fires we have lit, and
The possums you have killed.
got mistreated. That's right. And first impressions could have been like, "Oh, we're both tired. We're both cranky." I'm not a morning person. I was looking at him. I've seen him, a couple times. Like I figured he's probably a Hot Wheel guy or a Star Wars guy because they're always there early in the morning. And we just hit it off. Boom. Got each other's phone numbers right off the bat. And like, hey, if you see this figure, I'm looking for that one. So first impressions, great because we were bonding over Star Wars, so that was obviously a good first impression for me. You know, the when you look at some of these, the villains sometimes are one shot, like a hit or miss. So I call them the one hit wonders because we're talking about we went through a lot of first appearances of people that are popular and famous now, or famous in the comic book world. Let's put it that way. But you had mentioned a couple of people that were like one shots in a comic book that like
Oh,
what? Who was this character?
man. So the 90s has a lot of this, specifically with heroes. So you get some heroes that pop up. You have a lot of titles with like Image Comics that only got like one or two issues, and that was it. But with the title of X Force, Fabian Nicieza decided, I'm going to bring in this character by the name of Extreme. He was supposed
Extreme.
to be half Shi'ar, half Summers' brother. So he would have been related. Eventually, it would have come out that he would have been related to the likes of Scott Summers, who's Cyclops, and his brother
Cyclops.
Alex Summers, who is Havoc of the X-Men, Havoc of X-Factor. So this character pops up in X-Force, ends up being around for about a single arc, not very long, and he then more or less gets written into oblivion, and it's never brought up that he's potentially a third Summers kid. Later on, they do bring up the fact that this character actually existed, but that was almost 15 years later, whenever Marvel decided, hey, we are going to establish that there is a third Summers brother. It's just not going to be Extreme. It's going to be someone entirely different. And thus, this character has dissolved into the ether that nobody knows about
Nobody
him
knows.
unless if you know your deep cuts for X-Men, and that gets really deep whenever you start talking about
You don't
how many
you don't know if
characters exist.
these first impressions can be good or bad. In
And
extreme
this
cases, really bad.
particular, he was bad. But then you also get characters that appear that, again, nobody liked, like the villain Arcade, who's just silly, really shouldn't be around, as his entire gimmick is that he's a human that builds giant booby traps to trap the X-Men and annoy them.
Oh, it's an X-Men one. Okay.
He's
I was like, I don't
very
know Arcade.
he's very British in his concept. He's silly. You're like, Arcade, why are you a character? So he makes his first couple appearances through Uncanny X-Men back in the 1970s. This guy has been around for that long. Well, 1980s. This guy's been around since the early 80s, and he still makes the occasional appearance, and they always bring it out that he's some big bad guy that's returning, and every time he does, I roll my eyes and go, why have you not dissipated into the ether?
You're like, oh, how are you this important? So
Oh,
even he's
man.
even trying to do his first impressions 3 or 4 different times, and it's still not a good impression.
Well, in character can start off with an absolutely atrocious first impression. You
Right.
know of a specific one. I guarantee you that whenever you walked out of that movie, you went, that was a terrible character. Can you think of which one I'm talking about?
And one
It is from
of one
Star
oh
Wars.
oh Star Wars. Okay, all those out there don't hate me because of
Oh,
this.
all of
But
those
if you
out there have seen all of Clone Wars. If they
okay,
have. If they
that
haven't,
that first
you're going to
movie,
hate this character.
the Clone Wars when it came out was Ahsoka. She came out and she was just a snotty little know-it-all teenager. I was like, Ugh,
She
we already
rightfully deserved the nickname of Snips.
have Snips. I was like, we finally got over Anakin being this whiny butt, and then you bring in this whole new character, and now Ahsoka is hands down one of my top three favorite Star Wars characters, with Mara Jade, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka. Or she's just I can't get enough of Ahsoka now. It's like Dave Filoni did an incredible job writing her and maturing her, and so he did an incredible job of making her out to be like
I would say that
spoiled little
most of
brat.
that was led by George Lucas, just with some better writing tips, and Dave
Oh
Filoni
yeah,
decided to run with it.
I that and that's one as my first impression of her. Totally, totally. I have backpedaled on that right and left because she is awesome. She's one of the best characters in Star Wars, and even the first impression, like I said, can come across like so sometimes you got to give things two tries, at least twice. You
Well,
know.
and if there's anything that we can take from that is the job of good character development, where
There
you
you
see
go.
where a character starts out basically you don't like this particular character. I can say that with a ton of different shonen manga that I've read. Now, the
Hmm.
big one that's out right now is My Hero Academia. I hate Deku, the actual lead character, whenever he starts off. He's a
One eating
whiny,
eating his hair and
the one that
everything.
eats his hair, that eats All Might's hair and gains his powers. He is a whiny little brat.
He's like Luke Skywalker started.
He's
Must
he's
be from
he's
your side of the
he's
family.
worse than Luke Skywalker. He cries all the time. I'm like, I hate this character. But by the end of the first story arc, I realize, okay, I see where they're going, and
That's
I'm
you were
actually
supposed
starting
to.
to
You're
enjoy
supposed
the
to
character
exactly.
direction. But it's that initial first impression. If I hadn't have watched the anime first and knew where it was going, I wouldn't have started picking up the manga.
But that's
I
also
didn't care
different.
for this character.
But that's also different as far as the first impression standard, the first appearance standard of a writer is because the entire show was going to be written around him. So there was intentionality with writing him a certain way so that you bring him through this whole character development to this
Hey,
arc.
Naruto was supposed to be the same way, and I still hate that show.
Well, I guess but that's what I mean. It's like outside of like, hey, let's introduce this cool character. This guy's got metal claws and he's going to be one of the only things that can hurt the Hulk. And everybody's like, what? Wolverine? The only way to no. And now he's huge.
Everywhere.
He is
Everywhere.
everywhere.
As to kind of paraphrase Stan Lee, Wolverine was probably the most popular character that Stan Lee never created. Stan Lee wishes he had created.
And he's a Marvel character. That same one that he wished. That's I like the way he put
Hey,
that.
whenever Wolverine rivals Spider-Man in being everywhere within the Marvel universe because he sells a book, he's kind of a popular character.
It's I'm kind of a big deal.
Kind of a big deal. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
what. Well, I let's. This is a good segue because talking about the different ideas of the way that first impressions can be made, whether they're written a certain way with intention to develop you and bring you into a likability or lovability with that character, or whether they're written as a one shot to say like, hey, let's test the waters, see if people are going to like this character. Nowadays America, we don't do the polls and things so much. We do more everything's based off of toys. If they're popular enough that they got a toy, boom, they're gonna make it. What is it? A
If the
third of all
merchant
marketing
if
is
the
off of
merchandise,
merchandising.
yep, if the merchandise sells, then culture likes them.
Oh yeah, sitting in a conference at a Comic Con talking to the directors and the writers of was it Young Justice that basically got canceled because their toys weren't selling. The show
Oh
was like one
yeah.
of the best shows out there, but the toys weren't selling, and a
That
third of
was
their
Gargoyles.
was it Gargoyles?
It was
Uh,
Gargoyles. Specifically,
Yep.
Greg Weisman was talking about how the Disney show Gargoyles actually got canceled because of the fact that the toys were not selling well. But if you go back and look
Crazy.
at the analytics of like who was actually watching the show, it continually had a high demographic, but the entire purpose of the show's existence was to push a toy, a
To
product.
push a toy to make money. Well, and yeah, and we've talked about that. We're probably going to do a segment on that with Hasbro, with toys, GI Joes, how all those all started. But the parabolic reaction here is the idea of the importance of having um, first impressions or first appearances and what they can mean to you individually in developing relationships, whether you're hitting on a girl in a movie theater that's coming in to watch a movie or at the gym. They're there with some completely other intention, and you come in and try to distract them to a different. And so immediately the first impressions, there's a clash because their intention is one thing and yours is something completely different. So that can ruin all first impressions. So understanding that there's got to be some timing in that, bringing in Captain America at that time to try to encourage America to go into the war was huge and instrumental as a first appearance to say, yeah, we can do this. We can do this. And so I think of, when we're looking at the parabolic reaction and looking at even just some of the biblical studies and Bible stories that we talked about the last time on our podcast about the importance of growing up in Sunday school and hearing some of these old stories that just, whether they're stories for you or whether they're real, that they still leave an impact on you as an individual to say, hey, there's a difference, there's a change here. I think one of my favorite characters was Gideon. And you remember we used to do Gideon and in children's church, and we did the
Gideon
whole
Dynamite.
thing. Yeah, we did the Gideon Dynamite. I think I mentioned that on one of the other podcasts. It's still
You
one of my
you
favorite
did you
stories.
did.
Did I? It's still one of my
Yeah.
favorite. But here Gideon he's a grape herder. He's like the lowest of the lowest. He's got the menial job. Like nobody wanted to do it. He's doing it in hiding because the Israelites are being overcome by an outside source, an outside army. And so he's like trying to do this all in hiding on top of it. And so here he is. He feels humiliated. Um, he's he's humiliated, completely embarrassed by his job, everything that he's doing. And then the angel of the Lord comes and sits down in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Bezerite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to hide it from the Midianites. And this is my favorite part: is he looks at him, the angel of the Lord goes to Gideon, and he says, "The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor." That to me is, first impressions. Maybe like this dude's poor, he's raggedy, he's hiding, he's ashamed, he's scared, he's embarrassed, and yet the angel of the Lord comes to him and says, "You mighty man of valor." I mean, that's awesome to me because we'll kind of come back around to this, what how important that is. But you think of the difference between him because God looks at the heart, and then you think of stories like Moses. Moses first impressions was literally a whiny baby.
It's first impression, whiny baby. First impression of God. I don't want to do this because I can't speak to anybody.
Yeah, exactly. Here he is. He's like this whiny little baby. He gets put in a basket, and he gets picked up by the Egyptians. And then he as he grows up, sees an Egyptian whipping on a couple of Hebrews that are his kindred, and he murders the guy. He kills the dude. Tries to cover it up, and they call him out on it. And then finally, God decides to call him out and say, "Hey, I want you to lead my people out of Egypt." And so Moses raises another objection to God in Exodus 4:10. "Master, please, I don't talk well. I've never been good with words, neither before nor after you spoke to me. I stutter and I stammer." So here's this dude whining, complaining he stutters and stammers, and this is God's response. So this is why I think it's so important when, what we think is important first impressions may be completely different from what God sees in us. And he says in verse 11 and 12, he says, God says, "What do you think? Who do you think made the human mouth? And who makes some mute, some deaf, some sighted, some blind? Isn't it I, God? So get going. I'll be right there with you. With your mouth, I'll be right there to teach you what to say." God's response to him is basically just, "Don't worry about it. I'll put the words in your mouth. I'll tell you what to say." And then, of course, another great story is David. David, who was considered, he was an illegitimate, he was a bastard child. He was an illegitimate son. How we know that? Psalms 51:5 says that David says, "In sin I was born, and in sin my mother conceived me." And even then, David is actually reminiscing because he just committed adultery. He actually killed this Bathsheba's husband so he could have her, and then commits adultery with her. And then the Lord, even after all of this, David repents. David gives his heart back to God, says, "Okay, I'm going to do something different." And the Lord has sought for himself a man after his own heart in 1 Samuel 13:14. David turned away. Yet there's an importance here, when we look at all these different villains and these, like I said, I constantly try to compare this with this uh, stories that we read in comics and things like that are similar to a lot of the stories that we read, you know, You could talk about the baby in the basket and Superman coming on into Earth and they find him in a basket in a shuttle. There's all kinds of parallelisms that you can match and make. Those are places of starts that we can look at. Okay, what's our first impression of a character? What's our first impression of this person that we meet on the street? What's the first impression of uh, or continued impression of someone in our own family that we may like, I don't want to see them at Christmas dinner again. Oh, great. So, the idea is that even if they have done something so wrong, so bad that it's hurt you, Joseph was able to forgive his 10 brothers who beat him and ripped off his cloak and sold him into slavery. Years later, he was able to confront them and see them again, that the impression can change. Even as my impressions of Ahsoka changed, now she is one of my favorite characters. That the stories are important. The first appearances sometimes are not always the best first impressions. But first appearances, they can be good, they can be bad. But even if you think you have a speech impediment, as I got right there, speech impediment, God can still use that. God wants to use you just the way you are. That, like David, that there's a turning away from your wicked ways, and that he can be able to look at you and say, God looks at the heart. Man looks at the outside appearance. So first impressions sometimes can always be, but being able to be a writer in a comic book and say, okay, how can I develop this character into something awesome? That Wolverine is more than just a dude with claws, and all of a sudden he becomes this huge, incredible character that even gets the Phoenix thousands of years down the line. Nerd people will figure that one out later.
Stupid story
But the
arc, but it
God
works.
looks,
Whatever.
yeah, that's right. But God looks at the heart, even though a man may look at the outside appearance, and that God will look at you, and He can look at you, and He looks at Curtis, and He looks at me, and He says, "Almighty man of valor." So that's what we want to encourage you guys with today. First appearances, we've had a blast being able to talk about, not necessarily the origin stories, but the first appearances and the importance of first impressions, but also the importance of understanding that sometimes a writer writes them a certain way, and remember, God is the one who writes our story.
Because God
Not
understands character development.
better
Sit
than
on
we
that,
ever could.
Hollywood.
Yeah, that's right. Sit on that. All right. Well, hey guys, thanks for joining us. I'm Bill,
I'm Curtis.
and we are your
Geekdom
Geekdumb Prophets.
Profits.
All right, you guys
Take
have a great
luck,
way.
everybody. Have a
That's right.
good
Remember,
evening.
perspective. Your prisoner, your passport. Peace out.
Peace.
That was your first impression of me, Curtis. What was your first impression?